When my sister-in-law became my greatest challenge, a pastor's kid's family battle. I never thought family could feel so distant when you live under the same roof. But with Abigail, it's been a constant battle for acceptance. I never imagined that someone as close as a sister-in-law could feel like a stranger, or worse, an enemy. But here I am, 17 years old, caught in the middle of a family I love, yet feeling more isolated with every passing day. My name is Emily, and growing up as the only girl among 5 brothers, plus 2 other guys our family adopted, has never been easy. Our household in Chicago is loud, sarcastic, and deeply male-centered. I'm used to teasing wrestling matches and jokes that sometimes sting, but mostly feel like home. Then Abigail came along. She's my brother's wife now, married last December, but in truth, we've known her for 4 years. Our families have a long history. Both our fathers are pastors, and my parents met hers in college. Small world, right? She's from Wisconsin, while we're from Illinois, just outside Chicago. Our worlds have always been different, but somehow I thought that distance would make her acceptance easier. I was wrong. Abigail is 20, freshly graduated from college, polished and poised. She's the second of 6 siblings in a family where girls outnumber boys by a wide margin. Her world revolves around sisters' feminine charm and tradition, the very opposite of my rowdy, sarcastic, male-dominated home. At first, I thought I could bridge that gap. Maybe if I softened my edges, wore the cute dresses she liked, instead of my usual baggy clothes, I could be the sister-in-law she wanted. But every time I'm around her, I feel the weight of her gaze, cold, disapproving, like I'm a misbehaving child who doesn't belong. That gaze unsettles me, more than she probably knows. I've never been perfect. Diagnosed with a mild mental illness, nothing severe but enough to make me different. My faith demands perfection, especially as a pastor's kid, and that's a pressure I carry every day. Then there's my health. I have autoimmune diseases that weaken my immune system, making me sick often, and forcing me to miss church more than I want. I try to explain, but Abigail's joking comments cut deep. It would be crazy if you were faking right. She once said a half-joke that still echoes in my mind. People have called me a faker before, and while I try not to let it get to me, her words sting differently coming from someone who's supposed to be family. On Mother's Day, Abigail drove 6 hours to Wisconsin to surprise her mom. She stayed the night there, and I stayed behind, wondering if things could get better between us. That night, unable to hold my doubts in, I asked my brother if there was a problem between Abigail and me. His answer shook me. "She thinks you're immature," he said, "that you're cliquish with the girls at church, the ones you've known since you were 10. She thinks you're racist, even though I know you're not. She says you're boy crazy, but also too guyish. She thinks you're very young for your age." His words felt like a verdict passed down by someone I barely knew. I was confused and hurt. How could she see me like this? I asked my mom what she thought. She told me Abigail was going through a big change, graduating college, getting married, and maybe I just needed to be more accepting of her. "You're the bigger person," she said softly. "She's young. Give her time." But what does it mean to be the bigger person when you're already carrying the weight of expectations, when every move you make is scrutinized, and the one person you want to connect with sees you as a problem? That's the question I live with every day. From the outside, I imagine our family seems normal, typical even. But inside, there's a tension I can't shake. I'm the only girl in a sea of brothers, and now Abigail, the youth pastor's wife, feels like a rival rather than family. She talks down to me, not outright cruel, but with a tone that implies I'm broken or defective. When she looks at me, I don't see warmth or sisterly affection. I see judgment. I've tried to change to fit in. I swapped my oversized hoodies for dresses, hoping to mirror her feminine style. I smile when she's around and try to be polite, even when her words sting. I remind myself she's adjusting to new family, but 5 or 6 months in the distance between us hasn't shrunk. The church is supposed to be a place of refuge for me, a small youth group where everyone knows my name, where I've spent years growing up. But Abigail sees the girls I hang out with as cliquish and exclusive. She calls them those girls like we don't belong. It hurts because these girls have been my friends since childhood, my chosen family. They don't judge me. They don't see me as broken. Her accusations of racism cut even deeper. The 2 girls at church are Hispanic, and while I know our cultures are different, I've never treated them with anything but respect and friendship. But Abigail's words sow doubt in my mind. Am I really as different as she thinks, or is it just misunderstanding? My health keeps me from church sometimes. When I'm sick, it feels like the whole world is watching and questioning. Abigail's jokes about me faking it aren't funny. They remind me of every time I felt weak or excluded. The weight of being a pastor's kid is heavy. There's no room for imperfection, no room for struggles that can't be fixed with prayer. One evening, while Abigail was away visiting her mom, I sat alone in my room, the silence heavy around me. I wondered if she even saw me as family. Did she realize how much her judgment hurt? Or was I just a problem to be tolerated until she found her place in this family? My brother tried to explain Abigail's side, but the words felt like a wedge, driving us apart. "She's adjusting," he said. "She's dealing with a lot." But what about me? What about the girl who's tried, who's changed herself, who's reached out only to be met with coldness? I reached out to my mom again. She told me to be patient, to keep trying to be the bigger person. I wanted to believe her, but sometimes patience feels like a punishment. Every family has its challenges, but this felt different. Abigail wasn't just a sister-in-law, she was my brother's wife, the youth pastor's wife, a constant presence in our lives. Yet every interaction left me feeling smaller, misunderstood, and unwelcome. The question that haunted me most was simple but terrifying. How do you make peace with someone who doesn't want to see you as family? I don't have the answer yet. But I know this is only the beginning of a long and difficult story, one filled with misunderstandings, judgments, and the desperate hope for acceptance. The days after that conversation with my brother felt like walking on thin ice. Every step I took around Abigail felt more precarious. I was constantly aware of her presence, her eyes on me, the sharpness in her voice even when she was just joking. I tried to stay quiet, keep my head down, but silence wasn't a shield. It was a spotlight exposing every flaw she thought I had. One Sunday, during the church service, I felt it clearly. Abigail was standing near the front with the other youth leaders. Her laughter was bright, the perfect picture of grace and confidence. Meanwhile, I sat with the rest of my family, a knot tightening in my chest. I looked over at the girls from my youth group, the ones Abigail accused me of cliquishness with. They caught my eye and smiled sympathetically, as if we shared a secret nobody else understood. After the service, my brother pulled me aside. You've got to be more careful," he warned. "Abigail's trying to help you fit in, but you keep pushing her away." His words stung. How do you push someone away when all you want is to be accepted? At home, the tension simmered like a pot about to boil over. Abigail's comments grew sharper, sometimes barely concealed beneath a polite smile, sometimes blunt enough to make me flinch. "You should try dressing more appropriately for church," she said once, glancing at my worn jeans and hoodie. "You don't want people to think you're trying to stand out in the wrong way." I wanted to scream. Isn't church supposed to be about acceptance, not appearances? But I swallowed the words. It never ended well when I fought back. My health wasn't cooperating either. The autoimmune flare-ups grew worse, and I was forced to miss more gatherings, more chances to prove I belonged. Abigail's subtle jabs about my sickness being convenient made me dread every cough, every ache. One night, feeling defeated, I confided in my mother. "Mom, I don't know how much more of this I can take. Abigail acts like I'm a problem, like I'm too much trouble." She sighed, tired but steady. "You're her sister-in-law now, Emily. She's adjusting to a new role, new family, new responsibilities. It's not easy for her either. Sometimes she takes her frustrations out on the wrong person." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that Abigail's coldness wasn't about me, but about her own struggles. But every day the distance between us grew wider. One afternoon, my brother and Abigail invited me over for lunch. I wanted to believe it was a peace offering, a chance to bridge the gap. But the atmosphere was strained. Abigail barely looked at me, and when she did, her smile was tight-forced. "Emily, you should think about what kind of example you're setting," she said quietly. "People notice how you act, especially the younger kids." Her words felt like a judgment rather than advice. I wanted to ask what she meant, what was wrong with how I acted, but I stayed silent. After lunch, I left feeling more isolated than ever. It was clear Abigail wasn't ready to accept me, and maybe she never would be. That night, alone in my room, I cried, not just for the coldness in my family, but for the hope that had been slowly fading. I wondered if I'd ever belong, not just in this family, but anywhere. And I wondered if Abigail felt the same loneliness I did, trapped between who she was and who she was expected to be. The weeks after that tense lunch felt like living in a constant battle zone. I tried harder to be the bigger person, as Mom said. I smiled, more nodded. When Abigail talked, toned down my sarcasm, and tried to dress more appropriately. But nothing seemed to close the gap. If anything, it felt like the chasm between us was swallowing me whole. One Sunday evening after church, everything finally blew up. We were all gathered in the church hall for a small reception. The room buzzed with chatter and laughter, except for the cold bubble around Abigail and me. I was standing near the refreshment table nursing a soda when Abigail walked up, eyes flashing. "Emily," she said sharply, "you can't keep ignoring how you come across. You're acting like a child who doesn't understand the seriousness of being part of this church family." I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger. "What do you want from me, Abigail? I'm trying." She laughed, but it was hollow bitter. "Trying? You don't even know what you're trying for. You act immature, boy crazy, and disrespectful. And you expect us to just accept that." The words hit like a slap. "Disrespectful," I whispered. "Because I'm not perfect. Because I'm sick sometimes. Because I'm me." She stepped closer, voice dropping. "You're a pastor's kid. You should be better than this. We have standards here." Suddenly the room felt too small, suffocating. I looked around. People were staring, some curious, some judgmental. I wanted to run away, to disappear. Instead, I forced out, "Maybe it's not me who needs to change." That night, my brother and I talked again. This time, the weight in his eyes was heavier. She's under a lot of pressure," he said quietly. "She's new to all this, new wife, youth pastor's wife. She's scared, overwhelmed. But that doesn't excuse the way she's treating you." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he saw it too, and sadness that the woman I wanted to be close to felt like an enemy. At home, the tension was unbearable. My parents were caught in the middle, trying to keep peace, but unable to fix the fractures. One evening, Mom pulled me aside. "You need to pray on this, Emily," she said softly. "Sometimes forgiveness is about more than just saying the words. It's about understanding the other person's heart." I wanted to tell her I was tired of pretending of forgiving, without feeling forgiven in return. But I kept my silence. The worst was Abigail's coldness whenever we met in the house. She barely spoke to me unless it was to correct me or remind me of some expectation. I found myself shrinking, retreating into myself, wondering if I'd ever be the sister-in-law she wanted. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between Abigail and my mom that cut deep. "She's too childish," Abigail said quietly. "Not ready for this kind of responsibility." My mom sighed. "She's doing her best, Abigail. Give her time." I wanted to scream. "Give me time. How much time do I have to lose before you accept me?" But I stayed hidden behind the closed door, tears stinging my eyes. Days passed, and the church events felt more like a trial than a community. I felt isolated, judged, and misunderstood, a stranger in my own family's world. Yet, in the quiet moments, I tried to hold on to hope. Hope that maybe one day Abigail and I could find common ground, that our shared faith might bridge the gap between us. But that day still seemed far away. The distance between Abigail and me wasn't just growing, it was festering, twisting into something I couldn't escape. The polite smiles at family dinners were masks hiding sharp edges. The church events, meant to be a place of comfort, felt like battlegrounds where every glance was a challenge. One afternoon, I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone to distract myself from the heaviness in the air. I caught sight of Abigail across the room on the phone with her mother. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "I don't know if I can keep this up," she said quietly. "Everyone expects me to be perfect. I'm scared I'm failing at everything." I froze. Was this the real Abigail? The woman behind the stern looks and cutting words. A part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her I understood the pressure she was under. But fear held me back. Later that evening, as we sat around the dinner table, the silence was thick and uncomfortable. My dad broke it, asking about Abigail's plans for the upcoming church retreat. Abigail's response was short, almost clipped. "I'm handling the youth group activities. It's a lot, but I'll manage." I caught the faint tremor in her hands and the tightness in her smile. For a moment, she looked vulnerable, human. After dinner, I found myself in the kitchen, washing dishes alone. Abigail joined me quietly, starting to clean the counter. "Emily," she began hesitantly, "I know I haven't been easy to get along with. I've been under a lot of stress." I nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. "I'm scared," she admitted. "This role, being a pastor's wife, a leader, it's overwhelming. And I guess I took some of that out on you." "I'm sorry." The words surprised me, Part of me wanted to lash out for all the coldness and judgment, but another part, the part that had been lonely and hurt, softened. "I've been scared too," I whispered. "Scared that I'm never going to be good enough for this family, for this church, that I'm always the problem." Abigail looked at me, then really looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Maybe we're both trying too hard to be perfect," she said softly. In that moment, something shifted. The tension didn't vanish, but a fragile thread of understanding began to weave between us. But old wounds don't heal overnight. The next day, rumors started swirling at church. Whispers about Abigail and me, about how we barely spoke, how we didn't seem like a family. It felt like everyone was watching, waiting for us to fail. When I confronted Abigail, she looked away. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I don't want this. I want us to get along." Her words echoed in my mind, but I didn't know how to respond. Could I really trust her? Could I believe that we could build something new from all this brokenness? The pressure didn't let up. Abigail was under scrutiny as the youth pastor's wife, and I was under the weight of being the pastor's daughter, who was too young and too different. One Sunday after service, my brother pulled me aside. "Emily," he said gently, "Abigail's been talking about you more. She wants to make things right." I nodded, hopeful but cautious. "Maybe it's time we all try a fresh start," he suggested. That night, I prayed harder than I ever had before. For patience, for strength, for healing. Because no matter how hard it was family. And faith, our shared faith, was the only thing that could save us. The fragile thread of understanding Abigail and I had started to weave, began to strain under the weight of old habits and new pressures. The church retreat was just days away, and the tension in our home thickened like a storm about to break. Abigail threw herself into preparing for the youth group activities. She was determined to prove herself not just to the church, but to me, to my family, and perhaps most importantly to herself. But the more she tried, the more I sensed her cracking under the strain. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, I found her in the basement, surrounded by papers and decorations for the retreat. Her face was pale eyes, glassy with exhaustion. "Abigail," I called softly. She looked up startled. Then, almost like a dam breaking, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Emily," she confessed. "I feel like I'm drowning in expectations. Everyone expects me to be perfect, to be the perfect wife, the perfect leader, the perfect daughter. But I'm failing." I swallowed hard, my own heart aching with empathy and guilt. Here was the woman I'd been at odds with, the one who made me feel small and judged, and she was crumbling just like I was. "Maybe none of us are perfect," I said, quietly stepping closer. "Maybe that's the problem." We sat there in silence for a long moment, two broken souls, trying to find footing in a shaky world. But the reprieve was brief. The next day, a sharp accusation shattered the tentative peace. At church, rumors had spread like wildfire. Abigail was being criticized for her leadership style, and I was being talked about for my immaturity. The whispers stung, but what cut deeper was when my own mother, eyes heavy with disappointment, pulled me aside. "Emily," she said, "you need to think about how your actions reflect on our family. Abigail is under a lot of pressure. We all are. You have to be the bigger person." Her words echoed the same tired mantra I'd heard all my life. Be perfect. Be strong. Hide the cracks. But what if the cracks were all that was real? Later that evening, I confronted Abigail, needing to hear the truth from her. "Do you hate me?" I asked, voice trembling. Her eyes searched mine. "No, I don't hate you, but I'm afraid. Afraid that you don't want me here, that you think I'm replacing you." I shook my head. "I don't want to replace anyone. I just want to be seen." Her lips quivered. "I want that too." For the first time, the walls between us felt less like barriers and more like fragile bridges. But family is never simple. That weekend, my brother sat me down again. "Emily, Abigail, and I were having problems, and it's because of all this tension with you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "I don't want to lose my brother," I whispered. "You won't," he assured me. "But we all have to work on this together." As the church retreat approached, the pressure mounted. Would we find peace, or would the fractures deepen beyond repair? That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered a prayer for strength, for forgiveness, for hope. Because sometimes faith isn't about being perfect. It's about holding on, even when everything feels like it's falling apart. The day of the church retreat finally arrived, a day that felt less like an event and more like a crossroads for all of us. The tension that had hung heavy in the air for months seemed to follow me into the car as I drove to the church parking lot, heart pounding with anticipation and dread. When I stepped inside, the room buzzed with youthful energy, laughter, and chatter echoing off the walls. Abigail stood at the front, glowing with that familiar spark I hadn't seen in months. The moment our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us, an acknowledgement of everything we had been through, the pain, the misunderstandings, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could start anew. Throughout the day, we worked side by side, organizing, encouraging, laughing. Awkwardly, the walls we'd built were slowly beginning to crumble. She showed me a side of herself I hadn't seen before, a woman struggling to balance her own identity with the expectations piled on her, but also someone fiercely committed to the people around her. That evening, after the last session ended and the hall had emptied, Abigail and I found ourselves alone in the quiet sanctuary. The stained glass windows cast colorful patterns on the floor, bathing us in a soft, forgiving light. "I want to say thank you," she said softly, her voice steady but vulnerable. "For trying, for not giving up on me." I smiled, a warmth spreading in my chest. "I should be the one thanking you." We sat in silence, the weight of months pressing down, but somehow feeling lighter. Later at home, my parents approached us. My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she spoke. "You girls have grown so much. I see how hard you've both tried, and that means everything." My father nodded, voice thick with emotion. "Family isn't about being perfect. It's about love, forgiveness, and patience." For the first time in a long while, I felt a fragile peace settle inside me. The road ahead wasn't without bumps, but I believed now that we could walk it together. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on everything, the anger, the pain, the awkwardness, but also the growth and hope. I realized that relationships, especially family, are messy and complicated, full of misunderstandings and hurt, but they are also capable of healing if we dare to be honest and open. Maybe Abigail and I were different, but perhaps that difference was our greatest strength, forcing us to look beyond assumptions, to listen more deeply, and to choose empathy over judgment. I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude and closed my eyes, ready to face whatever came next, not as adversaries, but as sisters.